Cool. We're set. So take it away.
Hello? Hi. I go by Aluta Null, and I do a lot of things related to digital art, XR, games. Mostly just explore as much as I can. But I think digital artist is like a pretty solid word, like umbrella word to describe me and what I do. I guess like what my contribution to capitalism is. Disclaimer number one. So I'm from Johannesburg, raised by two very involved anti-apartheid activists. So I was born speaking political, like I open my mouth and it's a protest. So I was also born in 1998, so I consider myself like a Gen Z elder. And what I speak about a lot when it comes to my generation and like people raised in similar circumstances is how we grew up unsupervised on the internet. And I feel like Twitter was definitely a space where I experienced a lot of wild, unsupervised activity. So I got my first Twitter account when I was 11. I'm now 27, so most of my life I've spent on Twitter. Definitely been on that crumbling platform as I've gone through adolescence, early adulthood, now to my late 20s. And I think that explains why it's so difficult to leave. But I think that info adds a lot of context as to how the internet and social media have been like long-term parts of my identity, like many other people my age and slightly older. But the problem is the internet doesn't give you time to figure yourself out in private. You're visible before you really know how to even understand yourself. You're visible before you're even ready to be perceived, before you found your voice. And I think the ultimate thing that I wanted to do was to talk about performance fatigue. And I know that like it's super ironic that I'm standing here on stage talking about like how weird it feels being perceived by a room that's currently perceiving me, but that is like what I wanted to talk about. And it's like, before even getting to that point, you kind of need to think about what went into the creation of the character that's even standing on stage. You need to like dissect all of that before you can even really think much beyond that. When I was young, I used to think I was like really bad at being myself, but I was just growing, I was just buffering. And even today, I'm still buffering publicly, awkwardly on stage at a maze, just perpetually buffering. People are essentially seeing you before you even know how to see yourself when growing up on the internet. And I think that dynamic is what I really wanted to highlight today. Online identity asks us to be coherent before we even have any clarity. I used to think of expression in the sense of like, before I fully knew how I thought about something or how I understood something, I had a fire caption, I had a bio ready, like there's so many things that I knew how to express in internet language, before I had fully understood the topic myself. And I don't even mean that in the sense of like pretense. It's more of like understanding from a very early age how essential it was that my digital versions, my digital projections were communicating things as clearly as possible, and that they signaled meaning even if I myself didn't fully understand, or if I was still figuring things out. And identities evolve, and avatars and platforms, they shape that evolution in self-perception. So yeah, growing up online also feels like a form of like interface training, where we're learning how to build a version of ourselves that people can interact with and click with. So you're really learning about yourself through interfaces. One of my very early memories that I bring up a lot when speaking about, I guess, since most people here are game devs, character creation and like just digitally constructing versions of myself. I often speak about being a kid and like playing video games with my older brother, and how much effort he would put in to trying to find, at first it just started with trying to find a girl character. Then it started moving on to, okay, now there's girls, okay, which one's darker? Like, it was interesting watching my brother kind of try to guide me through finding ways to represent myself. And how he'd always struggle with that. But as games and like the platforms that I was interacting with, as they grew, things became a lot more customizable to me. And that was obviously very exciting. But that kind of led to like a general outlook of treating myself as an interface, like the real me. Because if like I had previously had restrictions on how I could display certain things, when I got to games like Sims and like I had so many options available to me, kind of like rewired, oh, okay, so I can exist in so many more forms, and then started kind of seeing the body itself as like an editable surface. And as a young kid, like I said, has the potential to really rewire a lot of your thinking, because it's all just like this big loop that comes down to me essentially asking, what does it mean when your sense of self is shaped by profile settings and reaction memes and toggles, I guess. Another thing, I'm very introverted, as I'm sure you can probably tell, so I spend a lot of time alone and I do a lot of thinking. So with this, I'm also not really trying to answer any questions related to like how you present yourself. I'm just asking a lot of questions. This is just my opportunity to think out loud, I guess. But going back to expression and figuring out how to do that as you spend more time in like various cyberspaces, I think you slowly start getting the realization that you need to optimize that expression in different ways. Yeah, so if you're viewing the self as this customizable interface, then you definitely and probably will at least attempt to make it palatable. And that normally ends in a lot of compression, in my opinion. And being palatable isn't necessarily bad. In some cases, it really is a survival strategy. But the issue is you're being palatable while being unfinished. And that self-editing and existing on the internet quite literally sees you being formatted for the feed. In like a lot of nuanced ways, you're curating your vulnerabilities, and in some ways, kind of becoming like an open source identity in a way. But even if not fully open source, then definitely still compressed in some form, at the very least for shareability and remaining updated in compact ways. A lot of this is done for visibility, if you think about it. So you can kind of also view yourself as like a JPEG of a version of yourself, where ultimately a lot of what you're keeping in the digital version is like very essential forms of what you are, just so that people understand it, even if it's like not as detailed, you know? Your identity is being filtered essentially into like a very postable, memeable, captionable form that can fit into some sort of feedback loop, you know? And I know that I said being palatable isn't bad, but when you kind of strip away layers of yourself in this way, your existence kind of becomes a form of like spectacle as opposed to being a very authentic portrayal of yourself just existing digitally. And there's a huge emotional cost on that constant performance. The way that I described this talk was that I'll be speaking about how our online identities begin to overwrite the messy, unfinished versions of ourselves, and that this ultimately blurs the line between being seen and being consumed. And I think that blur begins to happen when social media really ends up like serving as a form of like a stage where attention is currency. And obviously, the time that we're in right now, that's definitely something that I think is happening. I used to make Instagram AR effects a lot, and that really trained me to like pay attention to how people were choosing to present themselves, what they were choosing to show, like quite literally a filter, you know? And as someone who's making them, I also put a lot of thought into, okay, what am I helping people hide, you know? Or what am I helping people add? I hadn't really paid attention to any of that before this, but having this perspective really showed me that palatability can become a survival strategy. Other than literal filters, sometimes memes are like a form of that, but just different things that we do to armor ourselves. Yeah, one of my favorite things that I've made in like a while, I made a few years ago, it's called Please Stop Watching My Breakdown. It's like a malfunctioning TV that's essentially asking the viewers to like stop looking at it. And it's just like really emotional and it's not okay. And the context of this is it existed in like a mental health type of exhibition that I had done, where I was using augmented reality on like these broken TVs and stuff. And I kept thinking about that dynamic of having people like pointing their phones at this thing that's telling them to stop, but like if they stop, then the experience ends, like they don't see anything. I kept thinking about that a lot, and I still think about it today in so many different kinds of contexts, like just applying that thinking. But I think it's a pretty accurate metaphor for how we engage online and how we watch people crumble or grow, because sometimes there isn't really a distinction. Online, it feels like your vulnerability is given some sort of UI, and everything is just based on interaction, and our rawness doesn't even feel raw. It feels filtered into something that algorithms can understand. So it becomes difficult to kind of draw the line between sincerity and software, like something that might have initially started as a feeling might eventually get molded into something that's ultimately like cute for the feed, and that's gonna be reshared and whatnot. Essentially making breakdowns, content, sufferings, aesthetics, and growth is like a rollout plan. Like everything feels very strategic these days. Yeah, where we're all whips with corrupted save files. For me, I feel like it's, sorry. For me, I feel like I've been doing this whole like internet thing for so long that I don't even really fully understand the differences between like my real self and my digital self. I don't even really remember adapting to certain things. Feels like every year I update my bio like it's some sort of system update and like go through my profile pictures and whatnot. But it's strange how like I'm learning to slowly accept myself as unfinished and as being like a work in progress and like a temporary state, but like always being in like a weird kind of like limbo, I guess. And that kind of being the default that I try to work on. And I think there's like a kind of form of like resistance or like it feels violent, but like nothing in tech is actually violent unless it's actually violent. But like it feels like a form of resistance if you go against having to constantly appear like you know who you are, like you're resolved, you know, when actually you're a mess. And none of your files are named correctly, layers aren't named correctly. You're just saving the same version over and over and over again, and yeah, there's no final form really. But you keep optimizing yourself for that visibility as if personality should be legible in grid view. But what if we didn't do all of that? What if we let our contradictions stay uncaptioned and we let the process stay messy and incomplete and unsorted? Because, I don't know, at some point for me, I feel like my digital voice got louder than my real voice. I didn't just like perform better online, I felt more comfortable online. It was easier to like revise my thoughts online than in real life. It's easier to backspace online than in real life. Constantly deleting tweets, and not even because I say anything bad, but just like I'm over the thoughts. But yeah, the feed gave me time to edit, and I don't know, it slowly started feeling like that version was speaking a lot louder than the version of myself that attempts to speak in the moment. So yeah, I don't have a finished, solid ending to this. I guess, is still mid-edit. I'm still figuring it out, but I kind of also think that that's the point of all of this. And that we shouldn't try to chase perfection, that we should probably want to remain unfinished. Yeah, that's me, thank you.
Thank you for that personal presentation. We have room for one question. So who in the room has a question for that? Okay, so now I have to choose. You have already spoken, so I will do you. Here you go. Yeah, just talk, keep talking.
I was born in 1999, so I feel like I also grew up on the internet and having a digital self and things like that. And I grew up with it as a digital self, and that was good for me in many ways, and also had lots of bad things, and there's lots of warnings and things that go with that. So I think a lot of what you're speaking about came from your experience growing up and becoming an adult as well. So in 2025, my question was, what is your thoughts on young people today and underage people on the internet? Do you think the digital self is something that they should explore and be safe around and have precautions around, or is it something they should avoid completely? How do you think young people nowadays should navigate having a digital self versus an online, a real one?
It's tricky. So I have a niece, and she looks exactly like, she's about to turn 6. She looks exactly like me. She acts how I acted when I was her age. So it really feels like I'm watching myself grow up from like a third person perspective. And I think a lot about how she engages with her different, like her Roblox and whatnot, like everything pretty much. And like I'm constantly asking my brother, like, yo, are you gonna let her do this? Like, are you gonna let her do that? Just thinking of how it impacted me, like I said, being unsupervised on the internet. I honestly, I think it's not really something I can say whether like they should or shouldn't engage with that part of themselves. Like, it's late, it's already gonna happen. Like, there's no way. I think it's more about people, specifically their parents, because I feel like parents are really the only people who have the most control, kind of helping them navigate that in a very like safe and responsible way. Yeah, I've always had weird feelings just about children in general on the internet. My personal opinion is that they shouldn't be there. But at the same time, I was there. So like, I don't know, I'm constantly going back and forth with the topic of children. But yeah, I think it's more about helping them navigate whatever landscape they find themselves in when they eventually, yeah.
Thank you very much. That's all the time that we have, unfortunately. Applause for Aluta Null.